for the past, 23 years, I've been looking out of a window, maybe like 4 inches wide, like 2 feet long. And sometimes, like, you can't even see outside because they fog the windows just so you can't see outside.
On purpose?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They make all kinds of excuses why they do it, but they do it. And sometimes you just get, like, the sun ray through. You can't see anything out. So to go from that to this is kind of dramatic.
It's just day and night.
Yeah,
literally.
Sure.
Yeah,
it is. It is.
We have Gabriel Avila here. Gabriel, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you. How are you today?
I'm very great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Did you drive all the way down from Malibu today, or are you staying locally?
No, so summertime.
Summertime?
Yeah,
Okay.
my permanent residence is in Chino Hills, but I leave back to Malibu on Monday.
And you're going to start school right away there?
Yeah, so I work on the school. I work at the campus as part of community engagement services. And so Monday I move in to Drescher Apartment Complex, which is a graduate level apartment complex.
No more dorms?
No dorms. Yeah, no dorms. Single occupancy room in a 4-bedroom apartment overlooking the Pacific.
Oh, that's nice. You have a view then?
Yeah. So last semester, I had an apartment there, and my window was facing out. But now I'm in a room where my window. Well, so our living room completely, you can see the Pacific completely. But from my room now, I can see the whole ocean.
Oh, that's pretty inspirational. Waking up every day and seeing that every morning.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty jealous.
Yeah, well, it's so surreal because for the past 23 years, I've been looking out of a window, maybe like 4 inches wide, like 2 feet long, and sometimes, like, you can't even see outside because they fog the windows just so you can't see outside.
On purpose?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They make all kinds of excuses why they do it, but they do it, and sometimes you just get, like, the sun ray through. You can't see anything out. So to go from that to this is kind of dramatic.
It's just day and night.
Yeah,
literally.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Did you ever think that you were going to be in a place like that when you were in there?
I had these. It's so funny because I had ordered a catalog when I was in Lancaster prison and CSPLA, and some of my buddies in there would tease me about that. They still do. Like, one of them's out now, and he'd say, "Oh, I remember you had your catalog, and now you're there. It's insane."
Well, you manifested it then.
I guess I did.
You accidentally did.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I thought about that. I said, I really, it was on my mind, it was on my heart, but I never thought in a million years that I would ever get into a school like Pepperdine.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing accomplishment. I know there's a lot of people that try to get in, and they have everything in their favor, and you had everything against your favor, and you got in. Like, that must be such a pride.
Yeah, it is. And so when I first started, the first day I actually moved into campus last semester, I met the president. I met the first lady. I met Jim Gash personally. I met Jolene Gash. I had dinner at the president's house on the campus. And I got to sit courtside with the president for a half at the basketball game.
Really?
Yeah.
What did he smell like?
The president, I mean, this guy, Jim Gash, he's popular around the world. You're talking to, I'm talking about a man who rose through the ranks, was a rising star, straight out of law school, first in his class, and is doing wonderful things, inspirational, spiritual things for Pepperdine University currently.
Now that you're living it, now you're like, oh, this is possible. Like, my life can look like this. But what inspires you to pivot your life choices when you were at your lowest point?
It's so cliche when I say this, but a lot of people hear this. You really can't. When you're that low, you have no choice but to, like, get out of it, or to get up. And you have these wild, fascinating dreams about the way your life will be at some point. And of course, for the majority of men that are incarcerated, or the majority of people in the world. You know, if you think about it on that level, or even in our communities, it's a pipe dream, you know, because there's so much working against Hispanic men. And, you know, you look at my situation, I have the entire deck stacked against me. You know, I grew up in poverty. I'm Hispanic. I'm 5'6". You know, I have a criminal background, and etc. So for somebody like me to dream like that, a lot of people might say, you know, you shouldn't even be thinking like that. You know, you shouldn't be thinking that high. You know, you should be thinking something more at a base level, and just kind of like go through the rest of your life without being complacent.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit earlier today, and we were talking about that poverty line. I wanted you to get into that, in your opinion, and how certain lifestyles can affect that mentality and breaking out of it.
So poverty, I mean, around the world is, I call it the P word, because I was part of a law seminar last semester with very inspirational, passionate man on the issue of human trafficking and poverty, and Professor Haugen, and he wrote a book called The Locus Effect, you know, on how poverty and the violence and everything that it breeds is similar to these, you know, of the depletion of all kinds of resources, valuable resources that may not be in front of you now, but they get chewed up so quickly you'll never see them. You'll never be able to reap that harvest. And that's kind of what poverty does. You know, poverty incarcerates, poverty destroys homes, poverty destroys lives. On every single level, society is affected by poverty at the micro level, at the meso level, at the macro level, from, you know, entire nations to, you know, the Western Hemisphere. Poverty destroys so much, and poverty destroys everything from the individual all the way out.
And that's an interesting note, because it's a never-ending cycle at the same time. So there's the poverty that might lead to the incarceration, and that incarceration leaves a home without an extra person in there to help contribute, and that leads into more poverty. And it's just a never-ending cycle that it's almost, we can't break out of it. Yeah,
and so poverty is inherited for sure. I just took a class on poverty over the summer with a very reputable professor in religion. It was a Christian-based Pepperdine University requirement course, a GE. But poverty, it takes just one bad day, one bad month for a family to begin that entire cycle. And for us, especially, you know, growing up here in Riverside, in Casablanca, poverty was our legacy. Poverty was heaped on the shoulders of all the newborns perpetually. You know, you try to work yourself out of it, you try to work through it, and, you know, you're up against the entire system with no resources, you know. And so what, you know, it's confusing for children.
Yeah.
It's definitely confusing for adults who are struggling to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. It confuses families, and of course, this entire cycle of incarceration. And, you know, to just briefly, you know, I wanted to, because being a sociology major, you know, we usually talk in statistics, you know. Okay, lost earnings on poverty, right? Mm-hmm. Incarceration reduces lifetime earnings. The Center for Economic and Policy Research, CEPR, estimates that formerly incarcerated men lose about $179 billion in wages annually due to lower employment rates and reduced earnings, given that minority men are disproportionately represented in the prison population, and a significant portion of this loss affects minority communities. Right. So we're talking about loss on top of loss. The economic impact on families. Alla Baker Center for Human Rights found that nearly 2/3 of families with an incarcerated member struggle to make basic needs.
Wow,
That's
a
66%.
huge chunk.
Yeah. And this includes the cost of legal fees to represent, our men and women who are fighting the system.
And sometimes we can't afford the best type. And that contributes to the result.
And we know that.
Yeah.
Yes. Loss of household income, costs associated with maintaining contact with incarcerated individuals.
Yeah.
And then there's an intergenerational impact, which you were just referring to. The economic impact of mass incarceration extends to future generations. Children of incarcerated parents are more likely to experience poverty, just like we talked about. Limited educational opportunities and involvement in the criminal justice system, perpetuating a cycle of economic disadvantage. Community wealth, this is how it affects the community on a meso level. The mass incarceration of minority men drains wealth from entire communities. The Vera Institute of Justice estimated that the cost of mass incarceration to U.S. taxpayers is over $80 billion annually.
Wow.
This figure doesn't account for the indirect costs borne by communities, such as loss of economic productivity and increased social services expenditures. And then the racial wealth gap. This is big. The over-incarceration of minority men contributes to the racial wealth gap. According to a report by the Roosevelt Institute, mass incarceration has reduced black household and Hispanic household wealth by at least $1 trillion.
Wow.
So we're talking...
That just gave me chills. That's
$1 trillion.
A huge number.
We're trying to pick up the pieces.
I mean, you see statistics like that. Does that give you that drive to break it, change it,
for sure,
do something about it?
So last semester I did okay because I'm going into a very, very high level of academia coming from, community college, going straight into Pepperdine. The expectation is high. It's at the highest level. Like the professors there, they choose who they're going to give the good grades to because everything's written, everything's based upon performance. And so now that I know that going in, my goal is to just, complete my bachelor's degree with going straight out with a 4.0.
Yeah.
And that's my drive. I'm doing it for that. I'm doing this because I want to find a reason why things have to be the way they are and what we can do as a country, as a community, as a county, as a city to end this cycle of poverty. I was just reading a book on poverty. It would cost maybe $450 billion dollars to pull everybody out of poverty, just to bring everybody like straight across, which is like less than 1.5% of the national GDP.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what do you think that local governments and policies could do to help it without even money? Is there anything that could be done?
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement.
Simply acknowledging that Hispanic and just minority communities have been targeted for this.
Yeah.
For generations. Acknowledgement that it can change. Acknowledgement that it was wrong. And then a concerted, conscious, focused effort to end it, which we can do. It's
acknowledgement that might come in the form of Raza as well. That's acknowledgement.
Exactly. And this is why this movie is so big.
Yep.
This is why this movie means so much, because this movie portrays the pain and suffering of the Hispanic community that a lot of people don't see. Families, we live behind curtains sometimes. And you don't get that opportunity. You get that rare opportunity to see past that curtain. And this movie allows you to do that. We're bringing you into our households so that you can see the pain and suffering that our mom and our fathers are going through, that our sisters and our brothers are going through. And not just that, the suffering economically, financially, educationally, everything entailed with that. And that's why this movie is so huge.
Just bringing it back really quickly, you mentioned you were sentenced 23 years, or was that not your sentence?
So originally I was sentenced to 40 years to life.
Wow.
2 life sentences, 15 to life for second-degree murder and 25 to life for use of a firearm. So back in those days, even though I wasn't the convicted triggerman, just participating in a gang fight, the way that the law enforcement would frame it is that if you're in a gang, you guys are all one collective mind.
Okay.
Okay, you don't. There's no individual mind. There's no individuality in the gang. None of that exists. So if it's like if this guy goes and outside of what was expected, then everybody knows it and is in tune with that individual. So they had this doctrine called natural and probable consequences doctrine, and that's how I was convicted. I was convicted because I participated in a fight that escalated, and of course, part of me restoring my community, part of me making amends is taking responsibility for my actions. And so, of course, being a gang member with the machismo and all that, my actions definitely may have or may have not led to the escalation of the situation. And I can't say for sure because I wasn't in the mind of the individual who pulled the trigger. But I was arrested, not because I personally shot somebody, but because I was part of a fight in which somebody was shot and killed.
So you didn't pull the trigger.
No.
A shot was fired, but you were still convicted with homicide?
Yeah, I was convicted under a natural and probable consequence doctrine. So basically it stated this. The doctrine was that if there was any foreseeable possibility that somebody could die as a result of your actions, you were going to get pinned down with. So homicide would be the non-target offense because nobody agreed to that. The target offense would have been an assault or a group fight. That's the target crime. Now, if something bad happens because of a group fight, then technically everybody can go down. So they could take down 8 people for the action of one individual. And then in 2016, they started to reframe that. And eventually that doctrine got eradicated.
Wow. So if you would have been arrested after 2018 because of that, you probably wouldn't have been charged.
No, I wouldn't have been charged. Most likely I would not have been charged.
So there are good changes coming.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The criminal justice system has changed dramatically. So I had 44 years, double life. I went back to court because of a change in the law, had really good representation, had a really good attorney who was from my generation here in Riverside, who was passionate about the city of Riverside, who was passionate about seeing people realize their dreams, who knows the struggle, defended me, went in there and, pretty much cleaned house. This guy went in there and he got me a great deal where my murder conviction was vacated. So I'm no longer convicted of murder. But in lieu of taking it to the next level where we were going to have a contested hearing, I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, which then reduced my sentence to the 23 years that I did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you fought your case while in there.
Oh, yeah. I never stopped fighting my case.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Just dialing it back one more time. Do you remember that night, everything that led up to you getting there?
Oh, yeah, for sure, 100%.
And how many times have you relived that?
I mean, you kind of relive it every single day when you're in there, over and over again, every detail. And sometimes, you try to make. I tell you what, after all these years, going back and seeing, where everything happened, it's so much smaller in reality than in my mind. And that was what was kind of strange, is that in my mind, everything felt bigger.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It was a lot smaller than the way I had remembered it. So I 44 years, 2 life sentences, kind of stacked on each other. And lo and behold, there was some systemic change that I benefited from. But, I definitely, once again, here's an opportunity. Am I going to blow this opportunity and squander it so that the hard work of all the legislatures that were involved, the movement, the statistical evidence, this is my opportunity to make amends for those people who put in all that work that didn't have to.
So everything that's been going on right now is so inspirational. You going to school, Raza the film, but we can't forget the past as well. I wanted to see if you would be willing to open up a little bit about the 23 years that you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Sure, no problem. But, I think before I get into the prison part, I kind of have to tell you about my background here.
Okay.
So I was born and raised in a multi-generational gang family here in Casablanca in the city of Riverside. My grandmother, Connie Gomez, she passed away in 2008. But, she basically was one of the first tenants in the projects here in Casablanca at the Lincoln Apartments. That's where my dad lived and kind of grew up. And, of course, that's kind of where I spent a significant part of my time as a child growing up. So, I as a child, moved around. At times we were homeless. Homeless meaning like, we had no address. We were staying with other people, staying in rooms, going from elementary school to elementary school and moving around back and forth. Parents were, in poverty, doing, menial labor, non-educated work experiences. Sometimes it was good. Most of the time it was bad.
But they were working.
Yeah, they were working. Yeah. My dad, he lives with me now. But, he really turned it around when he got a job with the County of Riverside as a janitor.
Oh,
and he worked his way up after 25 years and retired as a superintendent of building services. Wow. Yeah. So he did really, really good for himself. I grew up through the 90s, which a lot of people refer to as very rough and tumble for gangs. The gang wars were, it was really bad. The 1990s was a really bad era. And, literally, every year, every summer, we were losing friends to the streets violently.
It was a literal war.
Oh, yeah. And it was a war with everybody, pretty much. That's the way it felt. And then you're being pulled in multiple directions. Growing up, I was a young teenage father, went to Ramona High School right here in Riverside. Was in the AVID program at Ramona.
So you were always smart.
Well, I don't want to say that. I just want to say that I had a chip on my shoulder for
to breaking statistics.
Yeah, and that was one of my motivating drives. It's like, okay, you're telling me that I'm too ignorant or too stupid to figure out your math.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and do it. I was just that type of person. I did okay. I didn't do great, but I did good enough to get into, I went on to college briefly.
Where did you go?
So when I graduated from Ramona, I actually got accepted to San Diego State University back in 1998.
Okay.
Went to San Diego. It was overwhelming. I couldn't hang with it, period.
It's a culture change. It's a culture shock when you move. Even city to city, they're not the same.
100%. And my family wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready for it. As a father, my son, his mother, we just weren't prepared for that.
Yeah.
And so came back and, picked up right where I left off.
How far into school were you when you decided to come back?
Oh, I was just a semester in,
Okay.
Yeah. So came back. I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and work. I didn't really know what my life was going to look like. There was just so much going on. Every day you're faced with obstacles and you really don't have a clear focus or even vision for what's going to happen with your life. You have no vision. And for those who did, they were blessed with this ability to see through. But for a person like me, I couldn't, So back in 1999, I got arrested for a homicide, and it took 23 years.
Was this right after you came back, or what was the time period from when you came back?
It was about a year after I came back.
Okay.
So
you would have been starting out maybe a sophomore in college at that time?
Yeah, I would have definitely been a sophomore.
Okay. So still really young.
Super young. I was 19. I was 19 when I went in. I was 19 years old. I never thought I would ever see the light of day after that. I was sentenced. And my sentencing, it kind of felt like my funeral, man. That was like, that was it. You're socially dead. That's basically what it amounts to. You lose all your status, you lose all your respect, you lose, everything that we hold dear to us.
Yeah.
Even a credit score is important. Just imagine losing all your freedom and your dignity that goes along with that. So, prison, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. Yeah. Not to say that, I have, but it's just a figure of speech that I'm trying to make. You don't wish that on anybody. The separation by itself is overwhelming.
Because you were already a father.
Yeah, I was a father, and I valued my relationship with my son dearly. There wasn't a day from the time that he was born. I mean, I was literally there when the moment he arrived in the world. I cut his umbilical cord all the way up until he was almost 3 years old. Maybe one time I spent one day away from him. Mm-hmm. And so, that
was the longest day ever.
Yeah. And after losing that, it was devastating.
Yeah.
It was devastating for me. It was devastating for him as a child. And thank God he turned out good. Thank God that he inherited his mother's disposition. That's what I say,
Yeah.
Because he's such a good kid, and I thank God every day that he's such. I don't ever think I've even heard him cuss one time. Year after year after year, in prison, and then involved in prison. Prison life is something different, and something that I definitely don't feel like I'm personally qualified to discuss the ins and outs of it.
Yeah.
But I could just say that at some point, as an individual, I had to make a decision to determine what my life was going to look like. I knew that, and it all started with this doctor that I was talking to on the tier. He introduced me to Jean-Paul Sartre because we were discussing. I was reading a book called The Blank Slate by Steven Pinker. I was a professor at Harvard University in psychology, and I was talking about, how this new theory in psychology called epigenetics, on how environment and genetics, can activate and, cause all kinds of negative things. And he says, hey, man, I know that. I'm qualified to talk about that because I've done all the biology and everything. I know exactly what you're talking about, but you can never take away human freedom. At the end of the day, no matter how bad it gets, no matter how awful it is, no matter how many genes get changed, you cannot deprive a person of their freedom. And sometimes it's hard to get a person to recognize that power that they have, but it's in every single human being. All of us have it. And sometimes it's just harder for individuals like me who were directed by impulse, who were directed by principles of the streets, who were directed by principles given to me by my family on the code and everything else that goes along with that.
At the end of the day, you're saying we all have one thing, and that's free will.
Free will. That's what we have. And I read a book. It took me 3 years to read it because it was so convoluted, but it's a book called Being and Nothingness by Jean-Paul Sartre. And I don't, say, hey, I'm not promoting the book, and I'm not recommending the book to anybody in particular, but it helped me. It helped me understand what freedom is exactly. And then once I was able to understand and find my freedom, to know that I got one opportunity to make it right. Just one. Because I'll never get this life back. I mean, even if scientists become so good that they're able to clone people, even if they clone me 20 years or 100 years in the future, it's still not going to be me now. It's going to be a version of me, but not me. So this is me now. I have one opportunity to make it right.
Wow. So they tried their best to take the one thing that you said, nope, you can't take this from me. This is my freedom. And you took ownership of that. And do you think once you put those dots together, you just pivot into starting to go to school in there, or what was the next step from there?
Yeah, so I got into Coastline College in Fountain Valley in Orange County. through their extended academic program. I excelled in that. And then as they started to invite colleges into the prison systems, Imperial Valley College, I did about, I think, 27 units there, perfect 4.0.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
Cool.
And then I also did some with Antelope Valley College. But by the time I paroled, I had about 132 college units. And with the GPA, between 3.8 and 3.9. And, I got admitted into an honor society. And I had all this going for me. And plus my transcripts, they were there. 3 associate degrees. And, I said, nobody could ever take this away from me. I earned this. I did this out of free will. Now, here's my opportunity to make amends to my community, to make amends for my family, and to now improve not only the legacy of my family, but the legacy of the entire community, the legacy of the county, the legacy of the city. Do
you feel like that's your responsibility now?
I don't feel it's a responsibility. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's more of a moral obligation.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, for a person like me, especially that now has access to the resources that I do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm in direct contact with some of the most respected and decorated sociologists in the field. The scholars, who are writing the books on subjects. So yeah, I got these resources. I definitely cannot squander them.
No, I mean, we can take so much value from that, which is my next question for you. What do you see in the value of mentoring these young people with someone like yourself? Because I think that maybe you didn't have that. How would that have helped you?
There was plenty of mentors back then. One guy that comes to mind is Beretta Palmerine. And I say his name because that guy never failed. Every time he seen me, every time he saw anybody, he'd be there and he'd be inviting people to church. And it almost, I get sad just thinking about it because this guy has made efforts for decades to change the hearts and the minds of people who are kind of messing up on the street. And so if anybody, I can't say because I don't know the history of the man since I've been incarcerated. I just know that he's always been there. But yeah, mentoring is important. I just think that I think that it's more of a community effort than, and like I said, it's up to the individual, but I think the inspiration will come from the group more than from the individuals, simply because our culture is so collectivistic.
What do you want to see as change in the community? What do you want to see before you go? Honestly, what's the legacy you want to leave behind? I
want to see all these children thriving.
Yeah.
I want to see all these families thriving. I want to see them directly connected to the system that they're a part of. I want to see them involved. I want to see them making big choices. I want to see them directing and controlling their lives instead of being controlled by these economic and these systemic elements that kind of sometimes create these immense obstacles that we can't get past.
Sounds like you want them to be more like your son.
Yeah, my son, man, I don't know where he got it from, but I a lot of prayer, a lot of hard work from my family, and of course, his family, his mom's side. But for all our families, I want to see them thrive, and I want them to also, the community to know, outside of our Hispanic community, that we are all part of this big community. I see myself as an American, Mexican American, Hispanic American, Chicano, Latino. That's all good, but we're all still part of the same fabric, no matter how we look at it, no matter how we turn it or twist it. We're all connected. Whether you're white, whether you're African American or black, whether you're Asian, it does not matter. We're all directly connected. But this movie is going to give a lot of insight on how the outside community can help.
Yeah, we're coming together.
Yeah.
We are the Raza. That's right.
Yeah, we are the Raza.
Thank you so much for being on. I'm so inspired just hearing your story, and I know so many people will be. So thank you for taking the time to come here and sharing all of it with us.
It was such an honor. I appreciate all the efforts. Thank you, and I appreciate you guys having me on today.